make some sense of it all, but I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today's Friday, February 20th, 2026. And a gentleman, a former school board trustee, was fined $750,000 for him saying that he didn't believe in gender ideology in British Columbia. And so this is a very, very bad precedent to set. It's a human rights tribunal. I don't think any of them are valid. I think they're all invalid. They don't behave in a way that is in line with the laws of the country. They're claiming for the greater good, but they're creating de facto laws that don't have any basis and violate our basic rights, but they don't seem to care. And so that's very interesting. Gender ideology is being forced down our throats, and it continues. The march continues. We have to recruit from foreign mercenaries because Canadians don't want to join the army. And yes, because our country has been sold out from underneath us, and people don't want to go and die in Ukrainian trenches. So that's not good. Chinese military in Canada in 2018. I was talking about that the other day. The Chinese military was training in 2018. Trump was president. Middle of his presidency, he didn't really care. He didn't say anything about it, right? It wasn't really big news, but he didn't really care. Prince Andrew was arrested, and some numbers, concerning numbers attached, and they're trying to confuse the separation question on purpose in Alberta. They're trying to do everything they can to make it a confusing question, one that, we can't possibly know what they meant. We can't possibly know. We don't know. So lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we have to talk about trade. And Paul says, Canada loses something else on Thursday. So that was yesterday. A long-standing bragging point as being the number one export market for U.S. companies. Mexico now holds that title based on Thursday's U.S. trade data. Mexico overtakes Canada as the number one destination for U.S. exports. Trump is slowly turning us down, and it's having an impact. And Mark Carney just wants more of it. I don't think he wants a deal with Trump. I don't think he wants a deal with the United States. Brian Lilly says, you really think we can pivot quickly on trade to replace the United States? Here are Canada's exports by dollar value and country for 2024. The annual exports to the next four largest markets don't equal 2 months of trade with the Americans. Diversifying trade will take time. It's not possible. Geography matters. Geography matters like biology matters, right? Like you can pretend all you want. You can dress up in a pretty dress. You can listen. If we had pipelines to the West Coast, we could export to all sorts of places that want our stuff, but we don't make moves to do that. I have no problem doing that. It's a great idea. Let's do that, but not to replace trade with the United States, to supplement it, to add to how much money we can make in our country, because that's good business sense, right? Like we should do that, but not to hurt the Americans, to benefit Canadians. But of course, benefiting Canadians means sending money to Ukraine, unfortunately. And Brian Lilly's got a nice chart here, and it's billions of dollars to China, billions of dollars to the United Kingdom, and $419 billion. So $500 billion almost to the United States. Not even close. Not even close. And nobody cares to acknowledge that. Is there a backup plan, sir? Backup plan? Nah, we don't need any backup plans in Canada. Here we go.
Now, has Canada also discussed any contingency planning with Mexico in case the U.S. formally seeks bilateral arrangements?
No, we haven't.
Now, has Canada also discussed any contingency planning with Mexico in case the U.S. formally seeks bilateral?
No, we haven't. Well, that's unfortunate. They should probably be looking into that. John says the ultimate irony. Uninformed Canadians elected Mark Carney as the expert to make a deal with Trump, when in reality his entire political career depends on him not making one and actually making the relationship worse. Yep. Here is a little bit. Rosemary Barton was talking in January 22nd to be exact, and she says, I'm curious to see how those attention-grabbing words that he has this week, whether there will be a price to pay for them in terms of how the U.S. responds. But what I think is so difficult about this moment is that you also have to find a resolution with the United States. And that is very much, of course, what he promised Canadians he would do. Yeah, Mark Carney said that he would get a deal, and he has not gotten a deal. CBC Watcher says it's been a month, and Barton and CBC have gone mum on asking Carney about what he is doing to get trade back on track with the United States. So, I guess if I was interviewing him today, my question would be, what are you going to do to get that ball moving again? Good question. But a month ago, we don't have an answer. Holly Doan says Canadians traveling to Cuba should expect to be stranded without electricity, food, or fresh water, says CAG Corporate. Diplomats updated federal travel advisory warning conditions were so poor, drivers were fighting in gas station lineups. So, welcome to Cuba. Do you have any food? No? Didn't bring anything? What are you thinking? Juno News says Minister Joe Lee touts Canada as a leader in EV production, but $52.5 billion in incentives has yielded one domestic EV, 33,000 lost auto jobs in 2025, and subsidies mostly benefiting U.S. manufacturers. And she's talking for a minute and a half, and I don't want to really listen to her because she's doesn't say much. Wall Street Mav says, why does it seem like the Canadian government is making every decision to make the country worse for Canadians? The government is intentionally making it better for foreigners and worse for Canadians, and the Canadian people keep voting for it. Our elections are rigged. We're not voting for that. It is not what we want, I don't think. Tom Quiggin says, is responding to the Globe and Mail, and the Globe and Mail says, out of nowhere, Canada becomes poorer than Alabama. How is that possible? Bad governance. Tom says it was not from out of nowhere. It was from 10 years of Trudeau and his post-national agenda. Yep. And here is Franco Tetrazzino, and he's got a minute and a half talking about, he says they're taxing beer into oblivion. In Canada, taxes make up 46% of the price of beer. In the US, it's 17%. In the EU, it's 30%. Canadian governments are making everything more expensive with their insane tax burden. Yes. Food professors talking about the price of food as well. And he says, if the fact that the US food inflation is less than half of Canada's isn't a wake-up call for Ottawa, I don't know what is. And remember, tariffs are inflationary by nature. If anything, they should have pushed food prices even higher in the U.S., not kept them lower than ours. Yep. And however, we're getting screwed, and we don't have any kind of real response to that. I wanted China to be earlier. We're going to move China up. China just got promoted. Here's 2018, going back to 2018, and Liz Churchill says Canadian Army in 2018, the Army deployed a team of 4 observers from the Canadian Army Advanced Warfare Center to China. The Chinese PLA accepted a reciprocal invitation from Canada to observe winter survival training in Petawawa. They're all Chinese military, so people were marching through, and people were driving around saying, weird that there's Chinese military marching around. CBC Watcher has Frank Caputo, and he says, 10 days, no response. This is from yesterday. While the Prime Minister called China the greatest threat to our security during the election, he signed a memorandum of understanding with China on intelligence matters. It's not public. Why? Because he's hiding something. CBC Watcher says, if only Canada had a free press that held government to account. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't. And if you try to become a free press to talk about potato-headed Justin Trudeau or anything like that, then they crack down on you and they silence you. It's wild. Paul Joseph Watson says, remember when the conspiracy theorists said they were mass importing migrants to become soldiers for regime wars? Well. Migration can provide the manpower for European defense. From China? Yeah, it seems like that's what they're gunning for. There's lots and lots of people. And here is Prince Edward Island, and this is 4 minutes. We'll listen to like the first minute and a half. I listened to it in double speed, so this is a little bit old. And remember when we talked about this? Nothing happened. Nothing happened. Here we go.
Came to us, and what we found was money laundering, corruption, and elite capture at the highest levels. During our investigation, we had some brave citizens, islanders from Prince Edward Island that came forward and provided a depth of information that would provide for a law enforcement agency sufficient grounds to launch a criminal investigation. The Master Jin Yan, who came into the province, it is our belief from our investigation that he's tied directly back to the PLC, or the Communist Party in China. We were able to establish that the monastery has set up a network of corporations. And if you look at it from a point of view of money laundering, it's what you would anticipate finding in an organized crime network. This monastery, if you look at it from a Dalai Lama's point of view, you would not anticipate finding corporations, land transfers, land flips, and citizens being paid under the table cash for residences and property. And that is what has happened in Prince Edward Island now for a period of a number of years. ever since the provincial nominee program came into existence, and they were allowed in.
Again, the investigation, Canada Under Siege, how Prince Edward Island became a forward operating base for the Chinese Communist Party. An investigation that really actually spans 5 years of research and intelligence gathering, and an 18-month to 2-year investigation that involved Gary Clement and Michelle Junot-Katsuya, the former chief of Asia Pacific. And it has a deep collaboration, including international and Canadian security experts, whistleblowers, eyewitnesses, religious experts, and consultation with multiple governments on multiple testimony on multiple continents. This investigation began with a question: how did Canada's smallest province become a strategic beachhead for
China.
influence and interference and potentially corruption?
From China. How? I wonder how. How did the whole rest of the country become the same beachhead for China? It's so crazy. David Knight says, Canada and Europe are unable to fill the ranks without recruiting foreign mercenaries by offering citizenship on top of money. Why is there a lack of manpower for defense in these countries? Great question. Great question. The reason there's a lack of manpower, the reason people don't want to join is because they don't want to go and die in trenches for foreign wars. I think fundamentally that's fundamentally it. Although right now there's not a foreign war to die in necessarily. I don't think we're sending people to Ukraine in the next couple of weeks. But I feel like the moves are being made to make it so people will say, oh, well, you know, if only there wasn't a war in Ukraine, but we've got to go and fight it type deal. They're going to grind people down so they're going to get what they want. And I don't want to be to have the Canadian government have any more say over me than they already do. Jason is interviewing this lady, and she says the Chinese regime is terrible, and they do terrible, terrible things, way worse than what the United States does. And what we're doing is bad. And Jason James says Mark Carney and Keir Starmer are hell-bent on turning Trump into an existential threat and positioning China as the West's great savior. I think that's true. And this woman is a splash of cold water on anybody who thinks that China is the savior here. Here we go.
You know, in Chinese, we say, if you do nothing, there's nothing wrong. You know?
Yeah.
If you do nothing, there's nothing wrong. If you do too much things, there's always a perspective people can blame you. But what China did is very, very different. China has every bad intention in the universe you can think of. Just look at just imagine they kill people to get their organ to be sold or be transferred to people.
Yeah.
They killed weavers, they killed Falun Gong practitioners, and they killed random Chinese, including Chinese teenagers, because their organs are fresh and good, because they are young. Okay? So they have every bad intention in the universe to destroy you. Americans try to do good and do some bad thing. I agree. But that's very different from China. China wants to destroy you, and not only because they are a bad person. It's because that's the only way for communism to survive. The communism survives by destroying internally and externally.
Yep. And we're watching the whole thing play out in Canada too. And it seems like we're paralyzed to do anything about it. It seems very, very strange that we can't do anything about it. This guy says, well, this guy points this out, and he says, Canada first confiscates all the guns. Canada then recruits third world migrants to fill the ranks of police and military. Canada then imports highly trained foreign soldiers. Do you see what's going on? And it's inescapable, right? I think if you look at this with a critical eye, and if you read this in a history book, you would say, how did these people not notice? How did these people not see? Why isn't anybody ringing the alarm bells? Why is it only one Brit in England ringing the alarm bells about what's going on? Why isn't anybody talking about this? And the answer is because they're all in on it. They're all in on it. Pierre Poilievre, yesterday, and I've got the video right here, put out a budget chili recipe. The Super Bowl's over, man. Like, budget chili? Are you kidding me right now? And so he says, go to the supermarket and just, go back to sleep, guys. Make some chili. Everything's fine. I'm going to make a cheesecake with Doug Ford, and everything's going to be okay. And I just don't believe him. at all? Food Professor says, this is a very important public advisory from the leader of the official opposition. That's right, Mr. Polyev. You don't need onions to make chili. It's perfectly fine to hate onions. So people are playing along with this crap, but this is like a 7-minute video. I'm sure that there's policy laced in it, right? And talking about how expensive food is and all sorts of other things. It's Polyev going around a grocery store. I have not watched this because I find like it's a waste of my time. I don't want to watch him talking about this. Why isn't he standing on a stage somewhere talking about the invasion of Canada? Why isn't he standing on a stage somewhere talking about how dangerous China is and how dangerous Mark Carney is? Why did he pass the Liberal budget? What the hell is he doing talking about chili? Are you kidding me? Wasting my time? What? Conserve what exactly, right? Get mad. I don't care. It's unconscionable. You have a job to do, for crying out loud. Make some chili? Okay. Resign as the leader of the party. Although it doesn't really matter who the leader of the party is, because we all know they all work for somebody else who doesn't live in Canada. They're globalists and they don't work for us. They work for them. So Dr. Mike P. Moffat says, in 2004, a young couple could buy a brand new family-sized starter home in London, Ontario for less than 3 times their income. By 2019, that had risen to 6 times, today 8 times, and unless costs go down, it will take over 36 years to restore affordability. So great. When I'm 76, that's going to be, everything's going to be great. Everything's going to be, or 80, never mind, the math was wrong there. Mike Moffat again says, here's the thing. He's responding to Phil. Phil says, the fact that this image aligns with government's idea of what a new family-sized starter home can be expected to look like is a big part of the reason why, if we want money to remain fiat or go down, we must change what we're building. Here's the thing. We did change what we built. Single detached homes starts are down 80% in Ontario since 2004. The last 20 years have seen the most transformative change in building typologies in post-war history. And look where it's gotten us. Ontario housing starts by type, excluding purpose-built rentals. So the starts are down, right? That's 2023. We're 2026. Is the data lagging, or is he just cherry-picking data? I'm not sure. Here's Mark Carney, and he says, Ryan Garrettson says, listen to this convoluted nonsense to get things built in Canada. No wonder 9 homes were only built last year. He keeps claiming things are being built at speeds we've never seen, maybe because we haven't seen anything actually being built. This is crazy. It's 3 minutes long. I don't want to listen to Mark Carney, so we're just going to carry on. We will listen to Mark Carney in a minute. He's talking about C2. Well, right here. Here's Mark Carney talking about C2, claiming that you'll need a warrant if you want to spy on people, suspected criminals. You'll need a warrant. But the reality is you don't need a warrant. The reality is the legalese in the bill makes it so you don't need a warrant, really. Mark Nixon says, Mark Carney is using the explosion and extortion cases in Canada as his justification for Bill C2. Bill C2, law enforcement can tap into your electronic devices, look at your communications without a search warrant, monitoring police state. Yep. So they're going to see what you're doing. If you're getting together with other freedom-minded people, well, they'll come in and do whatever China does, right? Canada Proud says Mark Carney just lied to Canadians, claiming that he would still need a warrant under Bill C2 to track your phone. Here's the actual text of the bill, section 48711. A peace officer or a public officer may, in the course of their duties, exercise any of the powers described in section 487, 492, 492.1, 492.2 without a warrant if the conditions for obtaining a warrant exist, but by reason of exigent circumstances, it would be impractical to obtain a warrant. This is yet another example of Mark Carney telling an easily verifiable lie in an attempt to amass power in his own hands. And they're always lying. I don't think there was a day during the campaign where Mark Carney didn't lie. And so, speaking of lies, Blacklock's reporter says BC First Nation confirms it never tried to recover alleged graves of 215 residential school students, despite claiming $12 million in federal funding for exhumation of remains. So that's crazy. In the real world, we call that fraud, says Corey. In Canada, there will probably be more tax dollars given to fraudsters. Yeah. Fraud on a massive scale, fraud of the taxpayer. And that's not good. You don't want that. But we have it. En masse, we have it. It's unbelievable. Cosman says Canadian high schools are putting up signals telling white kids they're oppressors, that racism doesn't apply to them, and to not even bother reporting it when it happens. Henry Street Secondary School in Whitby, Ontario, by the way. And so it says racism is not fluid. And so here's a black kid and a white kid, and I think one's male and one's female. I think maybe, does the white kid have a ponytail? It says in the blue text-like bubbles, it says racism does not go back and forth, one day benefiting whites and another day benefiting people of color. Racism is always against the marginalized group. crazy. It's Marxism. It's Marxism. They absolutely want you. Oh, I wanted you to listen to Mark Carney, didn't I? It's Marxism, and it is. They want you to believe something that is false, so they can continue to push their program forward. Here's Mark Carney talking about how Bill C2, they will need a warrant, but that's not true. Here we go.
I want to highlight a very important bill that needs to move, which is Bill C2, which is another series of border measures. But one of the core things that it includes is something called lawful access. Now, lawful access is through the courts getting a warrant, but being able to access messaging between suspected criminals. I want to highlight a very important bill that
Go back to sleep, Canadians. Don't worry, it's only criminals that will be watching. Sure. And Tamara Lich is a mischief artist, right? Oh, that mischief she's gotten up to. Here's Melissa, and I just wanted you to be aware because they didn't do anything for Lent as far as I know, or Pancake Tuesday. Was there a parliamentary Pancake Tuesday breakfast? Melissa, I didn't even know it was Pancake Tuesday. Usually I have some inclination that it's Pancake Tuesday, but it's crazy how fast this year's going. We're in mid-February already, almost the end of February. Melissa says, at a federal government press announcement today led by Minister Francois-Philippe Champagne, there was a happy Ramadan gathering. No mention of Ash Wednesday or Lent. Minister Champagne didn't even post about the Christian observance. Welcome to Canada. So be tolerant, but being racist against white people is just fine because racism is always against the oppressed group. And white people are not oppressed except legally. Weird. So apparently the what's his face Generu is messing around on his wife in Ottawa, and everybody knows about it. And it was fine when he was a conservative, but now that he's not a conservative, Mario up north threatens to tell his wife publicly. So this is a bit of an Us Weekly scandal in Canadian politics, but we are a bit of an Us Weekly country, eh? Mario says, am I going to be the guy that breaks it to Matt Generu's wife what Matt has done while in Ottawa? I'll tell you this much, the staffers, they know. And Aaron says, so it was fine and you kept your mouth shut about it when he was a conservative, but now that he's a liberal, you suddenly have a problem with it morally? You could not be more of a fraud, Mario. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And Generu is also cutting off his constituents, right? And Canada Proud is reporting Generu's constituents are desperately trying to get a hold of him to understand why he betrayed their democratic will. But Matt, who is in Edmonton as of yesterday, doesn't think he owes his constituents an explanation. He won't even show up to work to face them. Shameful. Yeah, pretty shameful. Pretty brutal there. And Sergeant, this guy says, they say every vote matters until it doesn't. And Wealth Moose says this is the part that should enrage people. When voters did their job, they showed up, they chose a conservative platform less than 10 months ago, and now they're told it doesn't matter because the guy they elected can just flip teams whenever it suits him. That doesn't make those votes flexible, it makes them meaningless.